Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're looking at some videos that are pretty raw and powerful.
Yeah.
They're about the outpouring of grief that we've seen online following the death of Kumawood actor C Confion.
Right.
And we're not focusing on the usual, online tributes or anything, but instead on these videos that have been posted by fellow actors on Twitter.
You're right.
And it's just something different. It's a different kind of look.
It is. There's like a real immediacy
Yeah.
to these videos that you don't really get with like a carefully worded statement.
Right, exactly. So let's unpack this a little bit.
Yeah.
So C Confion was a key part of Dr. Leakey's team, and he passed away today, December 20th, 2024. The videos that we're looking at capture the reactions of his colleagues as they're gathered at his family home, and it's really powerful stuff.
But I think it's so fascinating is how these videos give us a glimpse.
Yeah.
Kind of pull back the curtain on the Kumawood acting community. This isn't just a group of actors who happen to work together.
Yeah.
It really does feel like a family.
Yeah.
And you can just see that the depth of their shared grief is really palpable.
Absolutely. And for example, take this first video that was posted by @Onua_ZionFelix.
Okay.
You see actors Kia Keku and Nana Yaboa like openly weeping.
Right.
They need to be comforted by those around them.
Yeah.
And then there's just this moment where C Confion's mother completely breaks down upon seeing Dr. Lake.
It's really hard to watch.
Yeah,
It really highlights the profound connection they all shared.
Right.
And I think it's really important to remember that, Dr. Leakey's production company was the one that released the press statement confirming C. Confion's passing.
Yeah.
So, he very clearly played a significant role in his career, almost like a mentor. And so for him to be at the family home,
Right.
I think adds another layer of complexity to the grieving process for everyone involved.
Yeah, it makes you think about the weight of that moment, Yeah. For him to have to confirm the death of somebody that he clearly, mentored and cared for very deeply, that's a heavy burden.
Absolutely. And it really sort of underscores, I think,
Yeah.
Dr. Leakey's position within Kumawood. It's not just about mentorship. He seems to hold this position of authority,
Yeah.
respect, almost like a patriarch.
Right.
And so I think his presence there provides this sense of unity and solace, and it kind of symbolizes the strength and support of the entire Kumawood community.
Yeah, that brings up a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Which is that, we're seeing this intense grief playing out in a very public way. These videos are being shared online for the world to see.
Yeah.
So do you think the presence of cameras influences?
Oh, I think for sure.
Yeah.
How these actors are expressing their mourning.
Yeah, because it makes you think about
Oh, it makes you think about performative grief.
Right, exactly.
Which is, by definition, this type of mourning that's shaped by the awareness of an audience. So how we grieve might change when we know we're being watched.
That's a really complex concept, though. Because on the one hand, you see these raw, genuine emotions pouring out.
You do.
But then there's this undeniable awareness
Yeah.
that their grief is being documented and
Yeah.
shared so widely. It makes you wonder if it amplifies their sadness or maybe even causes them to hold back a little.
It's hard to know.
It's tough to disentangle.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to remember that grief is still grief,
Right.
even with cameras present.
Absolutely.
Those tears, those cries, they feel very authentic.
They do.
So let's move on to the second video that was also posted by @Onua_ZionFelix. And here we see Keku in 3940 again, completely overcome with emotion.
Right.
And you really get a sense of the depth of their relationship with C Confion.
Yeah. And this is where I think the cultural aspect of grief becomes really interesting because, you mentioned that Kumawood feels like a family.
Yeah.
And in many cultures, and particularly in Ghana community, plays such a vital role in the grieving process.
So we're not just seeing individual expressions of grief, we're seeing a community come together
Exactly.
to mourn and support one another.
Yeah, these videos really offer us this window
Yeah.
into the cultural nuances of mourning in Ghana, which might be very different from what we see,
Right.
in other parts of the world.
Exactly. And it makes you realize how much we can learn from observing how other cultures navigate such a universal human experience.
It's so true. And the way they're all, comforting each other.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes about the collective strength
Yeah.
that they find in each other.
And that makes me think about Dr. Leikie's role. Again, you mentioned this kind of hierarchical structure of Kumawood.
Right.
Do you think that his mentorship of C Confion maybe adds another layer of responsibility for him?
Oh, I think that's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, in some cultures, a mentor is seen as more than just a teacher or a guide.
Right.
They're almost like a surrogate parent.
Uh-huh.
And so if that's the case here, Dr. Leikie's grief might be intertwined with this sense of duty to guide his community through this loss.
Right. Like he's not just mourning C Confion, the actor, but C Confion, the person that he helped shape and nurture.
Exactly.
It's a really interesting perspective. It adds so much depth to what we're seeing in these videos. It's not just about the sadness, but also about the responsibility, the leadership, the strength that it takes to support others through such a difficult time.
And it makes you wonder, how Dr. Leike himself is coping. I mean, he's presenting, this strong, supportive front.
Yeah.
But you can only imagine what the internal struggle might be.
Yeah, right. And again, this is all happening in the very public realm of social media. And so it raises all these questions about, how we grieve in a digital age. Do you think there's a danger of social media turning grief?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Into a spectacle.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Social media has this way of blurring the lines between genuine expression and performance.
Right.
And so there's always that risk that even subconsciously people might feel this pressure to present their grief in a certain way, to curate an image of mourning that aligns with social expectations.
So instead of focusing solely on processing their own emotions, they might be caught up in how those emotions.
Yeah. How are people going to perceive this online?
That's a lot to navigate.
It is.
While dealing with such a profound loss.
Right.
But I also think it's important to acknowledge the potential benefits of social media in these situations. Sharing grief online can create a sense of connection, shared experience.
For sure.
It allows people to, express their condolences, to find comfort in knowing that they're not alone.
Absolutely.
In their grief.
Right. And imagine if these videos hadn't been posted.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have this, direct, visceral understanding of the impact C Confion had on his colleagues.
We wouldn't feel the weight of their grief so strongly.
Exactly. In a way, these videos act as this digital tapestry of mourning, weaving together these individual experiences of grief into this larger shared narrative.
Right.
And they allow us to connect with, C Confion's life, his legacy.
Yeah.
Even if we never knew him personally.
It's like we're all participating in the grieving process, even as observers.
Yeah.
It's both powerful and thought-provoking.
It is. And it forces us to ask, some difficult questions. Like, what is the appropriate way to grieve in a world where everything is documented and shared? How do we find that balance between authenticity and performativity?
Those are questions I don't think anyone has the answers to.
No.
But they're important to consider.
They are.
As we kind of navigate this new landscape of grief in the digital age.
Absolutely. And maybe the first step is simply acknowledging the complexity of it all.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way to grieve, and everyone's going to experience it differently.
So we've talked a lot about the raw emotion, the cultural nuances, the impact of social media. Is there anything else about these videos that stands out to you?
I think it's worth highlighting the power of storytelling.
Okay.
Even in the face of death. These videos aren't just about mourning. They're about celebrating C Confion's life.
Yeah.
The joy he brought to others.
Yeah. The
mark he left on the world.
It's like these videos are creating a digital memory of him. We're seeing him through the eyes of those who loved him.
And in a way that keeps his spirit alive.
Exactly. And that's something that transcends cultural boundaries.
Right.
The act of sharing stories, of remembering.
Yeah.
It's a universal way of honoring those we've lost.
That's beautifully put. And it brings us full circle to the impact of these videos.
Yeah.
They've given us insight into the Kumawood community, the nuances of Ghanaian culture.
Right.
And the complexities of grief in the digital age.
And they've left us with a lot to ponder.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
We have.
Yeah, there's so much depth to this topic, so many layers to consider.
There really are. And I think that's one of the, key takeaways here is that these videos, as brief and raw as they are, they really open up this much larger conversation about grief, about culture, about technology.
As we've been discussing this, I keep coming back to this idea of the digital tapestry of mourning
Right.
that you mentioned earlier. It's such a powerful image, you know?
It is. We're seeing these individual threads of grief kind of woven together,
Yeah.
creating this larger picture of C Confion's life and the impact that he had.
And what's so striking is that this tapestry is being created like in real time,
Right.
for the world to see.
Yeah.
It's almost as if the grieving process itself
Mm-hmm.
is becoming a form of public performance.
Which brings us back to that tension between authenticity and performativity.
Right.
It makes you wonder how this public expression of grief might shape the private grieving process.
It does. It's a good question. Does this outpouring of emotion online provide a sense of catharsis?
Yeah.
A way to process their grief collectively? Or does it complicate things?
Right.
Does it add another layer of pressure
Yeah.
and expectation?
Probably a bit of both, right?
That's it.
Grief is such a personal experience, but it's also inherently social,
Right.
We seek comfort from others.
But-
We share stories, we mourn together. And now with social media, that shared experience is amplified and broadcast
Exactly.
on this global scale.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
We're entering uncharted territory here.
Uh-huh.
A new era of mourning,
Yeah.
where the lines between public and private are constantly shifting.
It's like we're all collectively figuring out how to grieve
Right.
in this digital age.
Yeah.
There's no roadmap, there's no set of rules. We're learning as we go,
Yeah.
navigating these complex emotions
Right.
in a very public and often very messy way.
And I think that's okay.
Yeah.
Grief isn't meant to be neat and tidy.
Right.
It's raw, it's unpredictable,
Mm-hmm.
and it's deeply personal.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are no easy answers here.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way to grieve. And the impact of social media on this process is still unfolding.
Absolutely. What we can do is approach these conversations with empathy, with a willingness to listen and learn,
Mm-hmm.
and with a recognition of the profound complexity of grief in the digital age.
And perhaps, as we've done today,
Yeah.
we can use these moments of public mourning
Right.
as opportunities for deeper reflection, for understanding different cultural perspectives,
Absolutely.
and for exploring the evolving relationship between technology and our most human experiences.
Exactly, because ultimately these conversations aren't just about death and grief.
Right.
They're about life connection and the ways we find meaning
Yeah.
in the face of loss.
We've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
from the raw emotion captured in those videos to the broader implications of grieving
Yeah.
in a digital world. I think it's safe to say that C Confion's legacy will live on,
Good way.
not just through his work, but through the conversations that his passing has sparked.
And those conversations, as difficult as they may be, are crucial.
Yeah.
They help us understand ourselves, our communities, and the ever-changing landscape of human experience in the digital age.
And with that, we leave you to ponder this. How do you navigate the complexities of grief in your own life? And how do you think technology is shaping the way we mourn and remember those we've lost?